Let's try and get more answers now and bring in top chip analyst Stacy Rasgon of Bernstein. It's great to have you on a very important day to speak with you. What do you make of this story? What is the worst drop for NVIDIA, at least in years?
Yeah, you bet. So I spent a lot of time this weekend, most of my weekend looking at this. We knew it was going to be a circus today. It was pretty clear just given everything, all the takes that were there in the Twitterverse. I had sort of three conclusions. It's my own conclusions from this as I'll call it like a semi-informed layperson around this. But number one, I think the big issue was that the headline, the initial takes that came out on this was, oh my God, China's duplicated OpenAI for $5 million, which is categorically not true. We can talk about what they did, but they did not train this reasoning model for $5 million. That did not happen. We can talk about why. But number two, how did they get the efficiencies that they did? These are very, very good models. Like, I don't want to discount that. But the types of things that they did, they're not miracles. They're a mixture of experts, and they did some very interesting with something called multi-headed attention, and they use lower precision calculation. These are all things that are known, and all of the labs are all working on, if not deploying already. So there was nothing here that was like unknown to anybody else, like in the AI industry. Like, these are not miracles. Finally, like number three, I personally think, we'll talk about this, I think that this is clearly a panic today. I think it's overblown. The school of thought here is that, like, oh my God, these are so much more efficient. Like, we don't need as much investment. So number one, we actually don't know what they're spending to train the reasoning model that's causing the angst. My suspicion is quite a bit more than what they did to train the base model. And number two, you got to remember, like, I'm a semi guy. Like, I actually view cost reduction as a good thing. We want adoption. Like, in semiconductors, again, I'm probably biased, but like, cost fell by a factor of 2 every 2 years for 50 years. It was not a bad thing for semiconductor. It was a fantastic thing for semiconductor, man. Unless you think that we were already close to saturation in terms of the amount of compute that was going to be required for AI, we need these kinds of innovations and efficiencies, because otherwise, like, you're not going to be able to get to where they're going anyways. And so I think this was already happening. I think it needed to happen. And I can make, I think, a very clear argument that the more efficient things get, the more demand we will have, not less. So I actually think over the long term, this is a good thing, not a bad thing. But clearly the market disagrees today. So that is what it is.
I mean, NVIDIA hasn't been afforded the multiple it has, nor the stock price, for that matter, on the idea of a commodity. Has it? Hasn't it been rewarded the way it has on the idea of the best, of a moat, on some level of exclusivity, at least now?
Well, the issue here is not that. Where is the commoditization and the? It's not the chips. It's the models, right? So again, if your business model going forward is we're developing AI models that we're going to sell to the general public, maybe you worry. Like, I don't know. It doesn't mean that, like, the folks that are doing this still don't need to buy a lot of chips. I think they're going to still go to buy a lot of chips. And by the way, what did we see last week as all this was happening? We saw Facebook, or Meta, I guess, massively take up their CapEx guide. We saw all the Stargate stuff. We even had China actually announced a 1 trillion RMB, so like roughly 140 billion US, a program for AI investment in China. This was all last week, right as all the DeepSeek stuff was happening. DeepSeek's not new either, by the way. The V3 model, the base model, was actually released on December 26th. Like, none of this is new. None of this is surprising to any of the large U.S. guys that are spending all this money. They're spending it anyways.
Yeah, but I mean, NVIDIA's future in some respect is leveraged to the development, the production, and the success of Blackwell. If the company is telling you I'm going to read a comment from a spokesperson at NVIDIA, which I think speaks to this, and we can discuss on the other side, where they say DeepSeek's work shows how new models can be created, leveraging widely available models and compute that is fully export control compliant. Now, you could read that and say, well, is the company admitting that you don't need the latest, greatest, most expensive chip to do what DeepSeek appears to have done?
No, I don't think that's what they're. So they're making a statement on China here because that came out of China. But look, you're going to have, like, if you're getting a massive proliferation of models, frankly, of all shapes and colors and sizes, you're getting adoption. This is over time what we want, right? This is not, again, this is not a bad thing. You're going to hear this a lot today, probably already, but there's a concept known as Jervin's paradox. The idea
That's
is
right.
as efficiencies and costs come down, like demand more than offsets. I keep going back. I went to the Hot Chips conference a couple years ago, and Bill Daly, who's NVIDIA's chief scientist, was giving the keynote. He was actually talking about performance improvements in GPUs, and he talked about like over the prior 10 years, NVIDIA had improved GPU performance by like 1,000x. It was a bunch of things: process tech and architectures and sparsity and lower numerical precision, all kinds of things. But what he said in that keynote was like, over the next 10 years, we want to improve the GPU performance by another 1,000,000x. Like, again, unless you think that we are at the limit of what the compute that we need, I think this is a good thing. And if you look historically, we've never, ever had enough compute. Like, I've got the data going back even before AI was like taking off, just looking at like sort of installed compute in the data centers, like in MIPS and millions of instructions per second. I have this data going back like 30 years. It was growing at 50% a year forever. It never stops. So I'm personally not of the belief that you can have enough compute. I think if we're getting efficiency gains, which I think we need if we're going to meet the compute demands that AI and accelerated compute are placing on us, I think that we're going to get absorbed. I think we need this.